That was Jane Cowan talking to Kevin Tolhurst, and Jane Cowan joins us now live from our studios in Melbourne. Jane Cowan, as we just heard, Dr Tolhurst is sceptical about change. We heard a little earlier in Afternoon Live a volunteer firefighter also saying not much has changed. What are you expecting out of this Commission report, which has been so long in the making?
Well, definitely the main recommendation, and the one that has the potential to make the most difference, not just in Victoria but across Australia, is a recommendation relating to the stay or go policy. That's this advice that people should either stay, prepare and defend their house, or they should leave early. And it's based around the idea that houses actually can protect people in bushfires. And the Commission's lawyers have been arguing that the simple fact that the vast majority of people killed on Black Saturday died in or near their own homes really shows that that policy has substantially failed, and they say it should be thrown out in all its forms and instead replaced with a policy that really has voluntary evacuation as the primary response to bushfire, and then refuges for people who are unable to evacuate. So that will be the most closely watched recommendation, what the Commissioners say about the stay or go policy, because of course the Victorian Premier John Brumby from the earliest days after Black Saturday last year was saying that he thought stay or go was the right policy for Victoria, perhaps with a few adjustments. But what's being called for here is wholesale change. There will also be other recommendations relating to fuel reduction burning and everything from the regulation of the state's ageing network of power lines, which are blamed for the most severe fire, the Kilmore East blaze, which took out Kinglake, to planning issues like potential buybacks of land that's in areas deemed simply at too high a risk of bushfire for people to really live there.
Jane, on that stay or go policy though, there will still be, it'll be a voluntary decision, it'll be a personal decision. There's no question that there will be any element of force or enforcement that you must leave?
No, that's right. This has been a bit of a recurring red herring throughout the last 12 months of the Royal Commission. The government has liked to talk about the idea of evacuation as if it is forced, but really no one has seriously been contemplating the idea of forcing people to leave their homes. And even in the United States, where evacuation is the primary response, it's never a question of a state trooper turning up with a pistol on his hip and forcing people to leave, even though that has been the impression some Australians had, and certainly there's been a strong instinctive reaction against that kind of idea. But no, it would certainly be voluntary evacuation, but it would be recommended by the authorities. That's what's being contemplated, and then people would be told even possibly which route they should use to get out of their community, and they would be plans developed for specific towns, so each one would be different.
Is there any suggestion that we'll get, I suppose, apportioning of blame? We saw the head of the CFA and the Victorian Police Commissioner both change jobs or come out of their jobs during the course of the inquiry. Will the Royal Commission name names?
They've certainly been urged not to do that. The government's lawyers and the former police chief Christine Nixon and the former fire chief Russell Rees's lawyers have certainly said that the commissioners shouldn't do anything of the sort. But really the whole hierarchy of Victoria's emergency services has been severely criticised. They've been described as being missing at the hour of crisis, of having a passive leadership style that waited for problems to become apparent from the bottom up rather than actively checking. So there'll certainly be likely criticism in there, but whether the commissioners see any value in really naming names and pursuing individuals at this point is difficult to predict. And in any case, as you say, the fact that both of those key figures have already resigned, and Christine Nixon's announced that she'll step down from her latest role as the head of the reconstruction effort also, it really does, I guess, take some of the heat out of that issue already.
Of course, the Premier in Victoria is facing an election later this year. He's promised to consult before the government acts on any of these recommendations. Does that, I suppose, in some way threaten to potentially muffle this inquiry? Who's going to stand up and respond to it if they don't know what the government's going to do?
That's right. This plan to consult for 2 or 3 weeks that the Premier announced in the last week or so is turning out to be quite contentious. It might initially seem like a good idea to consult with the community, but people who've been involved in this inquiry are asking, well, if you're going to consult now for just 2 or 3 weeks, what have we spent the last 18 months doing if it hasn't been a $40 million extensive consultation? And how can anything that the government does in a 2 or 3 week period compare to the process of calling witnesses and examining and testing their opinions and evidence in the witness box? So there's quite a degree of cynicism about this, and the concern is, as Dr. Tolhurst said in that interview we just saw, that the government might be seeking to really cherry pick opinions from the community that are different to what's been heard in the witness box as a way to kind of justify doing something less than what the commissioners perhaps recommend.
Jane Cowan, many thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ali.
And of course that Bushfire Royal Commission report, which will come out, has been a long time in the making. 433 witnesses. Jane Cowan there in Melbourne.